Good evening, folks, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well this evening. Hope you had a nice weekend and you're ready for some more crazy stuff this week. So what we're going to talk about tonight, of course, where is Nigel Farage? He has gone AWOL. Well, not so much AWOL. He's gone to the US, of course. Talk a little bit about Brexit, the riots, care workers, and Trump. I mentioned Trump a little bit later on in the live stream. So I hope you're all very well. So let's jump into this first story. Oh my goodness. Nigel Farage jets off to US again for second time in 7 weeks since became Clacton MP. Nigel Farage is the keynote speaker at Saturday's Keep Arizona Free Summit, and the Clacton MP and Reform UK leader has already been paid an upfront deposit of £12,000 for the speech. Clacton man, yes, £12,000 to deliver a speech in Arizona to people who probably never heard of Nigel Farage. And what is he doing for his constituents in Clacton? Sweet FA. You know, of course, Parliament is closed at the moment, so he's not going to be asking questions on their behalf, but he's supposed to be taking emails from his constituents. He's supposed to be listening to them. He's supposed to have a surgery open where people can lodge complaints or lodge requests that they hope he will put forward to Parliament when he's back in Parliament, when Parliament reopens in September. But this is Farage following the money. Okay, there's more money to be made. Like an MP earns about £90,000 a year. So he's getting £12,000 for one speech. And of course, he's probably getting paid expenses to travel over to the US as well. So he's going over to the US, delivering a speech, and getting £12,000 for it. So why would he bother with Clacton? So who's the fool here? Farage or the people who voted for him? But of course, if you ask them, why did you vote for Nigel Farage? It's because, well, he'll bring down immigration, or he'll get Brexit done, or he'll close the borders, or he'll, deal with wokeness or something like that. And where is he? He's off in the US making money for himself. If he's not in the US making money for himself, he's on GB News making money for himself. Really, you would imagine, and I mentioned this before, you would imagine that come the next election, he'll be booted out because he's a terrible MP. But I fear that he'll probably have a safe seat. Because if people are stupid enough to vote for Nigel Farage this time, of course they're going to vote for him again. Because he's a liar and a charlatan. If he was able to convince people to vote for Brexit and still get away with it, I've often begged the question, why have the farmers, why have the fishermen never, marched on his house or, challenged him in the street or caused him some sort of, upset? Why have they not done this? Why have they not protested? Why have they not called Farage out? Is it because they don't want to lose face? Is it because they believe that they haven't been conned by this con man? I don't know. Brad, thank you so much for that super chat. Great to see you on the stream again tonight. Technically, net migration will go down if Farage and Robinson don't come back. Yes. Well said. Just get rid of these two and net migration will come down. So doesn't Tommy Robinson have an Irish passport? So it'd be nice to see that taken away from him. Great to see you on the stream, Stu, and as a member of Discord. He's Clacton's Susquash. People still think he's a man of the people. Yeah, a guy who earns, £97,000 a month through media outlets and speeches and stuff like that. They still think he's a man of the people. See, the thing is, if you voted Farage in the recent election, then of course you're going to vote for him again because you've switched off your brain or you don't have a brain. Like, what did people expect Farage was going to do? Some of them actually thought he was going to become Prime Minister. They're like, yeah, Farage for Prime Minister or Farage for President. I remember seeing something about that. Graham sent me. I hope you're okay. Great to see you on the stream, Sarah. Great to have you on. Hope you're well. Great to see everyone over from Politics Social. Hope you're all well over there. Nigel Farage should leave the UK and go to the United States. He really loves... Oh, I think the comment got removed. Oh, no. He really loves the US, especially Trump. Yeah. Wouldn't the world be better off if people like Nigel Farage just, with all his money, just went and, I don't know, bought a villa in the Cayman Islands or in the Caribbean and just stayed there, just drinking beer every morning, lunch, breakfast, lunch and dinner, having a beer on the beach, ranting and raving to his staff or whatever, and just leaving it at that instead of the damage they have done, him, Trump. I asked the question, before when Berlusconi was president, they call it president of the Camera. It was the prime minister here in Italy. And there was actually talk of him becoming president. But, they have so much money. Why don't they just go and live on a private island and leave the rest of us alone? It'd do the world a lot of good. Wouldn't the world be better without fascist period? Yes. But unfortunately, we have to share the world with them. So Farage is over there in America meeting with Donald Trump, probably, or maybe he won't meet with Donald Trump because Donald Trump couldn't be bothered to meet with him last time. That was a bit embarrassing. What was it? Farage said, "Yeah, I'm going to go and be by Donald's side because he was attacked because he was almost killed." Remember that interview with what's her name from the Newsagents podcast? That was really cringy. Anyway, let's move on. So, who is going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party? Well, James O'Brien basically says he doesn't give a damn.
The role of the leader of the opposition in particular and the opposition in general in holding the government to account becomes absolutely essential. And yet, I couldn't give two figs who wins this leadership battle, and I do this stuff for a living. I recognise everything I just said to you, I mean to the bottom of my heart. It is supremely important. But looking at that list of names, looking at the political landscape in general, looking at the history of our parliamentary democracy, I can't quite get my head around the fact that I couldn't care less. I thought I would. I've even placed a bet on the result, which is, without giving too much away, 99.9% certain to fail. But it hasn't worked. It hasn't injected any excitement. I mean, Suella Braverman is not standing for the leadership of the Conservative Party, a politician who I feel individually embodies much of the malice and poison that has dominated right-wing politics in this country since probably 2015, 2016. You'd think there would be a sigh of relief or an exhalation of excitement attached to the fact that somebody as toxic and as unpleasant politically as Suella Braverman has removed herself from the field, leaving, and I'll run through the list again, James Cleverly, Priti Patel, Kemi Badenoch, Tom Tugendhat, Robert Jenrick and Mel Stride. So the question that I'm building up to, as you've probably worked out for yourself by now, is why don't we care? Why?
We don't care because these people represent the past. They represent the previous government. And what happened to the previous government, the previous incarnation of the Conservatives? They were booted out. People were tired of that. So this is why I think whoever is going to become the next leader of the Conservative Party will never become Prime Minister. Now, maybe I'm going out on a bit of a limb by saying that, because they will not be the person who will lead the Conservatives to victory. They're going to be a placeholder. They're going to be a stopgap because they represent the past. Somebody will probably come along who will be a fresh face, somebody maybe who will win a by-election or win a seat at the next general election, or somebody who has been around for a while but hasn't been a member of the cabinet or a member of government. Somebody in the Conservative Party will rise through the ranks, and this person, maybe even a junior minister, but somebody we don't know very well, may eventually become the leader of the Conservative Party and then potentially become Prime Minister. Bowler Hatman, great to see you on the stream. You should look into the Young Conservatives, then Revolting, and it's hilarious. I remember seeing the Young Conservatives, some of them being interviewed, and they were like, "Yeah, we've given up on the Tories. They give us nothing. young people, even young conservatives, if there are still any, and we're not talking about people under the age of 70, okay? We're talking even about, people in their 20s. There are some of them still around, and even they are giving up on the Tories because they had hoped that the Conservatives would throw them a bone. They would do something, even minimal, for them. And even they are struggling to get by. Even they whose parents probably are multimillionaires are saying, it's difficult living in London. It's difficult living in a small flat with other people. I'd like to be able to buy a home and stuff like that. And even they, some of them, not all of them, but some of them are struggling. I'm hoping for Kemi Badenoch. Whoever it will be won't really make that much difference because even if it's Badenoch, she's not really good at PMQs. She's not very good at holding the government to account. We've only seen her on one or two occasions in opposition, and when she was, a minister, she was pretty pathetic. So I don't see her being really good at this. The right wing will love somebody like that, but you need somebody who can appeal beyond the Conservative Party. So that's why I think it'll have to be somebody who's not connected to the previous administration, because people want something different. That's why they voted this year to get rid of the Tories. They wanted change, even if it was Conservatives. But people who had voted for the Conservatives for generations said, no, we want change. We're tired of them. So you have to start with somebody new or somebody who's unknown to the public, and then build them up. So starting with somebody like Mel Stride or Kemi Badenoch or Robert Jenrick or Priti Patel isn't going to work. I think they'll just fill the space until somebody better comes along. And, we know, look, let's call a spade here. People say the opposition hold the government to account, but they don't. We know that. We saw it with Labour as well. Labour were trying to hold the government to account, but they couldn't because the government just ignored their questions. The SNP tried to hold the government to account, but they ran roughshod over Parliament. They insulted the Scots. So, and Labour is not going to be like that. But, if you don't have a significant number of MPs in opposition that you can rally together, and the Conservatives are not going to be able to rally enough people within the Labour Party to vote against the government. They're not going to be able to rally enough people in the other parties to vote against the government. It's going to be very difficult. So Keir Starmer is going to be able to do pretty much what he wants for the foreseeable future, at least until the next general election. And then after that, then we may see some sort of changes. Starmer mightn't even be Prime Minister by the end of this Parliament. He could go at any stage. He's already losing support, but that's sort of built in because it's expected. But let's come back to the Conservatives for a moment. So who is going to replace? I think probably James Cleverly will win. He's extremist enough to keep the crazies happy, and he's moderate enough, I think, to keep the moderates happy. So I think he will probably do well, because you need to win both sides. You can't just be a headbanger. You'll win the headbangers, but you won't win the moderates over. And remember, what happens is the members decide on a short list, and then, I believe, and then it goes to the MPs or the 1922 committee, and then they decide. But the 1922 committee and the MPs really don't like the idea of giving too much power to the members, because they want to avoid headbangers being put in charge. QA Library, great to see you on the stream tonight. Hi all. I said Starmer would only last 2 or 3 years. He'll be gone by the next election. Yeah, look, it seems strange at the moment because he won a massive majority, but remember Boris Johnson won a massive majority, and then the knives were already out a few years later. But Brad, thanks once again. Brad says Cleverly's greatest achievement is proving nominative determinism is bollocks. I often say that he should invest, maybe even claim it back on expenses. He can invest in a name change. It's about £44. Probably put it through as parliamentary expenses. get his name changed from Cleverly. From Braintree. I really hope. Well, I was sort of hoping that he would lose his seat, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. The people of Braintree, let's not go there. Every time you say, I'm going to say Liz Truss, Liz do not trust. Every time you say that, I'm going to say Liz do not trust. Somebody was calling her Liz Trust. I remember that. It was in the media, I think. I'm not sure Starmer will last a year. The riots have taken a lot of support away from him. Brainless tree, you mean? Well said, Sir Larry the Cat. I think the riots have taken a bit of support away from Keir Starmer, and then, the honeymoon period is generally not very long. And of course, support for the party and the government drops within the first few months. It's been pretty dramatic, of course, because of course he's faced these challenges, these massive challenges like the riots. That the idea behind the riots. The budget will say a lot about his government. Yes, well said, Reagan Elite. Great to see you on the stream tonight. The budget will be important. So how it's viewed by the markets, first of all, and then how the public view it. So if it's something quite positive, I think it will give him a bit of a boost. But look, Starmer is there. Starmer won the election. Starmer will be in place for a while, but he eventually will be replaced. So if he becomes a drag on the party, then he will go. And we'll see that going into the first by-election. So if Labour lose a by-election, there'll be pressure on Starmer to step down, to be replaced. If you lose a number of by-elections, and you're going to see by-elections, because when Labour won a massive majority, it means many MPs will get into trouble, do something wrong. Maybe some of them may resign from Parliament. Some of them may even die. We have to be honest about that. So there will be by-elections. I don't know when. It depends. There could be one this year. Probably next year we'll see a few by-elections, and that will be a test of Starmer. And if he loses a number of by-elections, then people within the party will say you have to go, because he has to be ultimately responsible. Okay, let's move on. Is this a Brexit story? Because we talked about this before, and it could be a Brexit story. So Keir Starmer vows to do everything we can to protect jobs at Port Talbot. So Keir Starmer has vowed his government will do everything he can to preserve jobs at the steelworks at Port Talbot. The Prime Minister was visiting South Wales, the region where the site is based, to walk around Altwalis wind farm and with the new First Minister of Wales, Ellen Morgan. The pair had been showcasing government's climate credentials in the region, with Sir Keir said he would reap the benefits of GB Energy, the state-owned company the government has launched to help develop future offshore wind projects. But the embrace of the green agenda has sparked concerns of job losses at Port Talbot, the country's largest steelworks, that is moving over to a greener form of steel production that requires fewer workers. So what's the problem here? So he can talk about trying to protect jobs, but it's going to be difficult. Like 13.5 million to help affect those, support. And so the government previously announced 13.5 million in support for those affected by redundancy. Look, these jobs are going to go, because instead of using blast furnaces, they're going to use electric arc furnaces, which are more environmentally friendly, in order to produce steel and steel products that can be sold for export. This is the main issue here. The European Union wants to reduce carbon emissions, and one way of reducing them is putting a restriction on steel production. So if you want to sell into the European single market, you need to follow these rules. It's like everything else. And if you want to reach that standard, then you have to change the way you work. Now, Tata, who own the steelworks, has said, look, we can't afford to do this. We want support from the government. We need support from the government. It goes on to say here, the package is designed, last week the government announced 13.5 million in support to help businesses affected by the Tata Steel redundancies. The package is designed to support businesses that rely on Tata Steel as their main customer, while the money will also be used to help workers who have been made redundant, giving them access to training and qualifications in sectors where there are job vacancies. Look, there's no way of getting away from this. The Tories had been sort of ignoring this for a while, but these jobs are going to go. Now, but there are new jobs coming due to a shift away from fossil fuels and a shift towards green renewable energy. So wind turbines, the installation of wind turbines, the solar panels, the installation of solar panels, retrofitting houses, for example, with insulation. There are loads of jobs available. Of course, it requires investment, it requires money. That's where the government should be putting the money, and there will be new jobs. But this idea that you can just hold on to old jobs, it's not going to. Even if the UK said, look, we're not going to sell this steel, it would still probably have to go in this direction anyway. UK jobs are lost, EU jobs are not. Brexit a factor? Yes, it is. Will Kosher Keith ban the gammon? Okay. I just rejoined the EU. No referendum. People would hate me for it, and I'd likely lose a re-election. But it's to save the country from economic turmoil. There shouldn't have been a referendum in the first place. This was the job of government. Politicians are paid huge salaries to understand the consequences of particular actions. The public, of course, had no understanding of the European Union, or very little understanding. Even so-called experts don't fully understand how the EU operates. And the average person on the street was expected to know what leaving the European Union would actually mean. And where were they getting their information from? Well, the experts were saying it was a bad idea, and Nigel Farage was saying it was a wonderful idea, along with Boris Johnson and who else? Jacob Rees-Mogg. So these are the people on one side saying it'll be wonderful, it'll be great. We leave the European Union, we'll have more jobs, there'll be a shorter NHS waiting list, there'll be more money for public services, businesses will be freed up, we'll end immigration will go down, all of these things. Of course, there were lies, but the public were convinced by the positive and not convinced by the negative. I've said this before. The problem with the Remain campaign was that it was not pro-European. It was pro-Remain. There's a difference between pro-European and pro-Remain. Remain was like, let's just maintain the status quo. Let's not rock the boat, not jump into the dark, which is understandable. Max is a pirate. No, I don't have a patch. And I don't have a parrot. But it was understandable. People would say, look, let's just maintain the status quo. But they were not pro-European. They did not sell a pro-European message. And that's part of the reason why there was no real pushback, no significant pushback against Nigel Farage. Max is a backup singer for Ailstorm. The Ailstorm have a wonderful song about a pirate getting his revenge. This is the kind of problem with direct democracies, with the referendum. That's why industrial democracy is a better alternative to empower the average person, because they can relate to that. Look, I think I'm an advocate actually of direct democracy with referendums, but the problem is the type of referendum that took place in 2016. The public were not informed. They were not sufficiently informed to make a real informed decision. People were told, well, we'll be like Switzerland, or we'll be like Norway, or we won't leave the single market, or we will have this, or we will have that. And there was no impact assessment. There was no talk of the cost. And there was a lot of dishonesty, of course, around it. While in a proper democracy, a proper referendum, I should say, what would happen is you would have information provided by an independent source who would send out to every household a booklet explaining this is what happens, this is what's going to happen if we vote this way in a referendum, and this is what will happen if we don't, we vote a different way. this is what will happen with the status quo, or this is what will happen if we vote to change. This information should be provided independently from the government, so that the public can make an informed decision. And if there's any shenanigans, the result is null and void. But we saw that there were significant shenanigans regarding the Brexit referendum, and it was pushed through anyway. We saw that the public were manipulated. There were organizations, combing through people's Facebook pages, collecting data, and then selling it to politicians who were using it to manipulate the public. That should have rendered the referendum null and void. But also the lies that were told. When it came to the single market, or businesses being able to, nothing would change. It was always everything will be great and nothing negative will happen. The politicians selling Brexit either didn't understand the European Union or trade or international organizations, or they were lying. And probably in the case of David Davis, it was probably a bit of both. Anyway, so this is a Brexit issue, of course. Is it going to, the government have to be a bit pragmatic about this and say, look, we're not going to be able to fix this. What we can do is we can throw some money at businesses that are struggling to find new customers or new suppliers. And what we can do instead with for workers who are being laid off is provide them some extra training, like in the past. That's all they can say. The Tories, of course, will complain about that, saying, why aren't you protecting the steel industry? It's really important. And it is really important, but the Tories threw it under a bus. And now this is what you're going to hear from now until the next election. Why isn't the government fixing things that we broke? That will be basically the Tory mantra from now until the next election. Okay, prison crisis. Horrific indictment of UK justice as thousands languish on indefinite jail terms, says UN torture expert. Now, once again, this is nothing to do with Labour. This is about the previous Tory government. Thousands of prisoners languishing in prisons indefinitely deserve justice and should be represented as a priority, the UN's leading torture expert has said. Speaking to Sky News, Alice Jill Edwards described sentences of imprisonment for public protection as a horrific indictment on the British justice system. IPP was introduced by Labour in 2005, allowing courts to impose prison sentences with no release date. Wow. I didn't know about this. They were abolished by the coalition government in 2012, but the change was not applied retrospectively, meaning approximately 2,852 prisoners remain behind bars, including 1,227 who have never been released. This is insane. I honestly did not know about this. Is actually the last Labour government, and thanks for that. I stand corrected. This was actually the last Labour government's plan. And it's a stupid idea. Like, why would you put people in prison indefinitely? Unless they're like serial killers or something like that. But generally, there's a life sentence there. But this is with no release date. Okay. Normally you'd have a life sentence, but David Blunkett introduced. David Blunkett was pretty conservative. And I mean that with a big C, not a small c. It was basically a Tory. Anyway, it goes on to say, Miss Edwards, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane and Degrading Treatment or Punishment, called upon the new government to commit to a full, partial resentencing exercise for those still in jail. It comes as Keir Starmer's administration grapples with overcrowding crisis, forcing the activation of emergency measures, allowing defendants to be held in prison cells for longer. So this would be a solution. You're talking about 2,852 people behind bars who could be released because, they don't have an end date for their trial. IPP was intended for violent and sexual offenders who posed a significant risk and harm to the public, but those crimes did not warrant a life term. What was the motivation behind this? Anyone on a IPP could only be released once they have served their tariff and the parole board has given its approval. Okay, so it's not the same as a life term. It was like a life term, but a life with parole, a bit like in the US, I imagine, or it was indefinite. Was it at His Majesty's pleasure? Is it? HMP, His Majesty's pleasure, unlimited sentence. Okay, thanks for that, Jeannie. Sorry, Frederick. He's tapped into overhead power lines. Not sure what that's about. People have been in jail for 20 plus years for selling a laptop and got 5 years because there was a risk. He's still at risk. He's still inside. My goodness. 20 years for selling a laptop. Can we tell me 10 names? The non-dumb taxpayer behind bars for a whole life term. That would be nice. They'd get him out of circulation. It'd be good for Britain. It's a terrible scandal. Since 2005, 90 prisoners have taken their own lives in prison while serving an IPP sentence. So, of course, the UN is looking at this not from the point of view of the individual cases. They're looking at it on the whole, and they're saying that this is not acceptable. It should be revised, and it certainly makes sense, because if there are people, some people who are in prison who may not necessarily be justified for them to remain in prison should be released. But if they're on for an indefinite term, then of course that's not going to happen unless the government decide to change the rules. And of course the Tories will complain about that. Okay, guys, we're about halfway through the stream, so I'm just going to take a short comedy moment, and we'll be back in just a jiffy with more serious stuff. Hope you enjoy this.
I will now take a question from the floor. Do you have any questions for the floor? No? Oh, that's a shame. Never mind. What is that? That is not funny. No, that's not funny. Who did that? Right, that's it. I'm going. Goodbye.
Right, that is it. I'm putting things straight because I am angry right now. What a disgrace to happen to me. It's not funny, it's not okay that those donkeys, those asses, put that horrible banner down about me saying that I crashed the economy, when actually I didn't, because that was the OBR. And if I knew who the OBR was at the time and I understood the whole economics, then it would have been easier. It's not my fault. What happened to freedom of speech in this continent? I should have freedom to speak. Only I should be free to speak, because I'm the only one that is right. I'm the only one that has a valid opinion, and I am sick of this. Do you know what? I'm not going to do any more press calls. That's it. You can go away. Angry Liz Truss. That's right. Goodbye. Bye.
Oh, she's angry, all right. So, terribly, whoops. Let me expand that. Terrible inheritance to blame for emergency prison measures, says Starmer.
Even before the riots this summer, prisons were already full to breaking point. The immediate influx of hundreds of people jailed or on remand since the widespread violence has tipped the system into emergency measures. Operation Early Dawn means people once charged will be held in police cells and only taken to court when a prison place is free, a sign of how serious the situation is.
It is an absolute crisis. It's the worst I've ever experienced in the job for just over 26 years. This is a sensible solution for now, but it is just another sticking plaster.
Ministers and police chiefs insist anyone that poses a risk to the public will still be found a place in custody. But inevitably, people charged with less serious offences will be more likely to be bailed and released. Rotherham saw some of the worst violence when this migrant hotel was attacked. In the town centre, they're worried police will now be diverted from dealing with other crime.
We got more than 16 cameras.
Nawaz says he has to report shoplifters on a daily basis, but officers don't always turn up.
Are you worried there are going to be even fewer police available to answer your calls?
Definitely.
How will you feel if someone who's been charged with shoplifting ends up being released on bail back into the community?
So it means you are giving him a chance to do this thing a second time.
But this is the consequence of the Tories not building enough prisons, closing prisons and not building enough new ones. So these problems are going to continue for a significant amount of time in the future.
Before the riots that swept across Britain, the government had already announced plans to tackle the prison crisis. From next month, an early release scheme should see thousands of spaces freed up. But swift justice for rioters means hundreds of places are needed now. So Operation Early Dawn has been announced in the hope it'll tide the system over until then. The Prime Minister says it's a crisis he's inherited.
There was a basic failure, which is a failure to have enough prison places for the number of prisoners that were being sentenced to prison. That is about as basic a failure of government from the previous government as you could possibly have got.
But it all adds to the court backlog. People already facing record delays for cases to be heard, having to wait even longer.
As QA Library says here, Manchester Crown Court has had its room full this week. The backlog to repair bills is £1 billion now. My goodness. We love a good queue in England. There's one for a prison cell, but I bet it's unlikely buses will turn up at any time or turn up all at once. Yes. You'd be waiting a bit longer for the buses. Starmer was all about more sticking plaster politics, wasn't he? It certainly seems like sticking plaster politics. Certainly at the beginning, it'll have to be in a sense because they're not able to build prisons overnight. So it's going to be sticking plaster after sticking plaster, and this type of firefighting results in mistakes. I think you're going to unfortunately see people released from prison who should not have been released, and then questions will be asked after, why was this person released? Labour needs to remind the public constantly and consistently what the Conservatives have done. Yes, this is going to, and I agree with you, Frederick, and it will work in the short term. But what they need to do is, and it's not because I think it's an excuse, but what they'll need to do is fix things in the medium term as well. Because you can use this as an excuse, and it's a legitimate excuse, but it'll only work for so long with the public. The public will be patient, and then they will say, okay, well, we want to see people in prison. We want to see prisons filled. We want to see prisons built, but not in my area. Okay, that's going to be a big problem as well. We want to see more public housing, but not in my area. And politicians like the Conservatives and to a lesser extent the Liberal Democrats will, of course, take advantage of that by saying, well, not social. Vote for us, and we'll keep social housing away from your area. And the NIMBYism is going to go through the roof, and it's going to be difficult, no pun intended, and it's going to be difficult for the government to build a lot of social housing. I think it's a bit pie in the sky, not so much about the building itself. Is you have a number of things working against the government. You have the developers who don't want to build because they make more money. Well, not maybe more money, but they can make a quick buck buying land, getting planning permission, and then selling it off. So they're not actually all that interested in building, because once it's built, you have to invest a huge amount of money in building it, and then in building the property, and then you run the risk of not being able to sell it or having to sell it at a loss. So it's there's no risk or very little risk in buying land, getting planning permission, and then selling it off and holding on to it as you see the price of the land go up. So there needs to be pressure on developers. And of course, when it comes to actually building, you need materials and you need staff, you need workers, you need labourers, and they're in short supply at the moment. What Labour should be doing is a massive rebuilding scheme, attracting workers from all over the world. This is going to piss off the racists, but you're going to be able to build houses, and you're going to be able to bring down the cost of housing, and you're going to give young people an opportunity to get on the property ladder, to reduce their rents maybe, or to actually buy a home, which is beyond the dream of many people at the moment. So if Labour could actually achieve that, but it would require a massive amount of investment, and it would require changes to the immigration system, which of course would open a can of worms with the likes of Farage and others. PFI prisons, so that would be a public financing investment. Is it investment or private financing for prisons? They may go down that road as well, where the prisons end up being run by private companies. There are, of course, huge problems with that. Anyway, so let's move on from that story. Care workers. So, as we know, a lot of care workers come from abroad because British people, like in other parts of Europe,
I was at
they
breaking
don't want
point.
to do these jobs because they're not well paid. That's one issue, and of course, it's very difficult work, and it's the conditions, the working conditions are pretty terrible. So, as we know, a lot of the so-called native population don't want to do these jobs. So, agencies rely on foreign staff, but there's a big problem with this.
Questioning the decision of obviously moving here. Was it the right decision?
Thousands of miles from home,
I nearly committed suicide because it was too much.
they are caring for the elderly and the vulnerable, and yet they are being ripped off, abused, exploited.
The reality is that modern slavery is almost being baked into the care sector.
This man came to the UK to work as a mental health nurse. He doesn't want to be identified because he's afraid of repercussions. Working in the private sector, he became suicidal but was unsupported by his employers. And when he tried to leave, they presented him with a bill for £9,500, although they didn't say what for.
They were just not flexible on the payment thing, and they were like, if I don't pay by this time, they're going to send an email to Home Office and tell them that I'm off their visa and they're going to have to take the visa off me.
So they threatened you?
I don't know what to call that, but that is what.
And this is, of course, what they're doing is they're taking advantage of people who maybe don't understand the system. They come over to, from outside Europe, so they don't know their protections. And it's difficult for them to return to their home country because it's so far away and it's so expensive. So the agencies or the private companies are able to take advantage of people's ignorance. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm just saying, people are not familiar with the law. They're able to take advantage of that and abuse them over this.
What I had from them.
New employers were willing to pick up the bill if he could show the breakdown, which the company refused. In the end, he lost 4 job offers.
It felt like because I was leaving, they were pissed. They were angry that I was leaving. So you have to pay the money before.
Yes, because it's difficult for them to find other staff. So they would blackmail you into staying. They would force you, they would threaten you into staying with them because it's very difficult for them because they have to look for staff to do the job, and it's very difficult to find the staff, and they have to bring them in from abroad. They have to help pay for the visa. And I think this money that they were talking about is probably part of the cost of the visa, which is not legit because the problem with the visa, of course, is that you can't really do any other job. So if you come in as a carer, you can't say, well, I'm going to quit and I'm going to work in a supermarket because the visa, it doesn't cover that. You have to work in the care sector. So he was at an advantage. He'd be able to go to work for another care home, which was probably desperate for staff as well. If you had a system where people would be free to do whatever job, an open visa in a sense, people would be better protected because the businesses would have to treat them much better
before you go.
Wages.
I don't want to be treated like that.
The case was only resolved with the help of the Royal College of Nursing pointing out that some of the costs the employer was trying to claw back, such as the recruitment fee, were illegal. He now has a new job.
Now, an exclusive data shared with Channel 4 News, the Royal College of Nursing has shown that there has been a 6-fold increase in just 3 years of the number of complaints to their helpline about international care workers being exploited. And this often involves managers or employers wrongfully trying to take back tens of thousands of pounds.
There are huge skills shortages in the care and nursing sectors, and in the past year alone, 94,000 carers were recruited internationally.
As you said there, you get paid more at Aldi. And, you know, if you work for Aldi, you're not going to get insulted, you know, on a daily basis. You're not trying to deal with people who have maybe dementia or mental health issues. You're not going to have people vomiting on you or worse. You know, working in the care sector is extremely taxing. It's very difficult. It's strenuous. It's stressful. It requires physical strength, a lot of physical strength. And I know of people who have worked in the care sector who end up with long-term health problems, back problems, muscle problems because of the physical work of the care sector. And it's very badly paid as well. So, you know, a lot of people would say, look, to hell with this, I'm going to work in the supermarket, you know, pack shelves or work at the till or something like that, which is less stressful. The pay is pretty much the same. And then at the end of the day, you go home and you don't have, you know, if you're working in the care sector, you're always thinking, okay, I have to remember to do this tomorrow, or maybe I forgot to give somebody their medication, or I forgot to give somebody a meal, then you get stressed, you know, and the having to deal with difficult patients or difficult managers or difficult other members of staff. You know, you don't really have those types of problems in a supermarket, or certainly to a lesser extent. Physical and mental strength is required for carers.
But they come on a Tier 2 visa, which means they become tied to the company they work for.
So it's not even just the job that they're tied to, it's the company that they're tied to. So they can't leave the company, or it's very difficult for them to leave the company.
The reality is that modern slavery is almost being baked into the care sector. We are seeing lots and lots of workers who are being charged unlawful recruitment fees, so being charged thousands upon thousands of pounds to come to the UK and take up employment. We're then seeing workers who suffer exploitation on a day-to-day basis, be that requiring to work long, onerous hours without being paid properly, being provided with substandard accommodation, which often they're being charged for, and then being placed in a position whereby if they make complaints about their treatment, they risk being dismissed.
And if they are dismissed, they have just 60 days to find new employment or risk losing their visas. This woman, and again...
So then it has a chilling effect. You know, you keep your head down. You don't complain. Because if you complain, there's a risk that you could lose your visa and then you'll be deported. So, you know, a lot of these people have moved to Britain to improve their lives or to send money back home because their families are poor. And the last thing, you know, you have a huge amount of pressure on you just to continue working, just to keep your head down. Don't complain. Max, did you see the BBC report of a certain Scottish trawler firm, TN Nicholson? Many people from the Philippines, India, Africa being recognised as being trafficked. Before, a lot of these workers would come in from the European Union and they would have access. They wouldn't have the same level of rights granted to them as British workers. But if they were being abused, they would have some sort of means to bring this up. But a lot of these workers now are coming from outside Europe, and they don't understand what protections are in place for them, and they're coming in on visas. As you see here, the visas are extremely restrictive, so they're not able to leave a European worker before could work for one company and then decide, look, I'm not happy with this company, I'll go work for another, or I'll leave this sector and I'll work in a different sector. So there was a requirement, a thin requirement of businesses to treat their workers a little bit better. But if you have complete and utter control over a worker where they can't leave, because if they do, they could end up losing their visa and then be deported, then this worker is going to refuse to complain, avoid complaining, avoid creating any problems, just keep their head down, and of course, accept abuse.
She didn't want to be identified, was promised accommodation when she arrived. None was provided. Her first month she earned £174, and every month £300 was deducted for transport.
I'll be paid with
£170 and then £300 taken away for transport. So the company were like, okay, how can we take more? So we have to pay this person a certain wage. Well, here's your wage. Oh, but wait a minute, we have to deduct for accommodation, or we have to deduct for transport, or we have to deduct for tax, or we have to deduct. So of course they're going to find ways to claw some of this money back that they have spent getting people into the country, because they probably had to pay part of the visa, or they had to pay the expenses of the recruiting firm.
With a driver who comes and picks me up around 5 a.m. and then we'll be out the whole day until around 11, 12 midnight in some instances. But then I'll be told you only worked 6 hours, therefore you're going to be paid for that 6 hours. I thought it was modern day slavery. It's something that I've read about, I've studied about, and of course I felt it was institutional abuse.
And the RCN says that the cases that have come to them are just the tip of the iceberg.
You know what's so annoying about all of this? The likes of GB News, Talk TV, Nigel Farage and others will mention zero about this. Because this is a story where you have people who have arrived in the country, quote unquote, legally, being abused. And the right wing will not mention one word about this. This is part of the problem. They'll talk about people arriving in the country illegally. They'll talk about people arriving in boats. They'll talk about asylum seekers in hotels. They'll talk about all of these things. But they will not mention at all, and this is right-wingers all over the place, not just in Britain, but in Europe as well. They won't mention how workers are being exploited. They say that they're stealing British jobs or they're stealing European jobs, but they won't talk about how they're being exploited. This is slavery. They don't care about these people. They don't care about the exploitation. Why are we not hearing more about this? Who is the criminal here? It's these businesses that hire these people and then try to claw back some cash, abusing them, keeping them in a situation where they can't leave.
I think what we need more than anything at all is for the governments to really start to look at this in a very proactive way. We need them to look at what is happening in the labour market in social care. We need to look at what is happening with recruiters, with employers, but we also need them to address what's happening at source, because people are being brought across under false pretences and exploited across social care.
And that has to change. And hopefully the government start to do something about this. So in regards to employment, that's a negative story, but this is perhaps a more positive story. It says here, giving workers right to switch off could boost the economy, says number 10. This is another thing that's really pissed off the likes of Richard Tice, Ben Habib and others like that. Giving workers the right to switch off is key to productivity and could boost the economic growth. Downing Street said. Labour has promised to give employees the right to ignore work-related calls and emails out of hours, so homes do not become 24/7 offices. So, of course, since people moved away from, office limited work to smartphones and, internet connections at home where you would be expected to reply to emails or where you could access your emails at home, this is alien for a lot of people who are younger than, Generation X. So anyone who's maybe younger than Generation X, there was a time where, if you worked in an office, you were there, you started at 9 o'clock or 8:30 or whatever, you finished at 5 or 6 o'clock, and then you went home and you never heard from your employer until the next day. Okay, there was no checking emails from home, there was no taking calls from your boss. There was a concept where, for example, a GP or a doctor would be on call, where they'd have a telephone with them, a mobile phone sometimes, or they would have a pager. So have a look on the internet, Google pager, and they could receive a message saying you need to call this person or you need to make this phone call. And the whole concept, can you imagine where somebody could be trying to call you or sending you messages while you're in the cinema, or you're having dinner with your family or something like that? It was an alien concept 30 years ago for ordinary people. Now it's normal. It's people are being sent messages at 10 o'clock on a Sunday evening. Please have this report ready for me on Monday morning, or remember to have this meeting at this time, or whatever. Can you just check this email, or can you just send a message to your colleague about this? It's insane. People need to disconnect. People need to be free from the office, and it benefits the employer. Study after study has shown that where people work fewer hours, they're more productive. Because if you are working not 24 hours, but if you're working like 12 hours, you're not able to focus for 12 hours. So it'd be better for you to work 6 hours or even 4 hours, but focused, and then refresh and then start again. But you need to disconnect. Ministers are looking at models for other countries where it's already right to disconnect, such as Ireland and Belgium. The Prime Minister's spokesperson today said the plan was about making sure we're not inadvertently blurring the lines between work and home life. No, you need a separation. The purpose behind this is to ensure that employees and businesses have the right arrangements in place to ensure that they can be productive. This has to be sold as a positive, and businesses that are engaging in it have to be presented as in a positive light as well. Because of course you're going to have businesses that will not go along with this, and they need to be named and shamed. Because of course people will feel, well, if I answer the boss's email, if I show that I'm always available, this will help my career. But this is damaging to everyone else. So you'll have one person who's not following the new rules or the new guidelines, and they're trying to take advantage of it by being closer to the boss. And employers want people to be always available. So if you show you are, then of course you're going to climb the ladder faster than others. And many people fear that. Many people fear that, well, I better answer the email, or I better respond, or it may impact my career ladder, my career path, or it may affect me getting a bonus or something like that. But this mentality has to be removed. People should be free to switch off as soon as the work is over. Employers, and it has to start at the top. We can't expect employees to do it. They don't have the control over this. Employers have to start saying, okay, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whenever the business, then close of business, after close of business, people should not be contacted at home. It's not an emergency room, okay? It's not a hospital where people need to be on call all the time, where there are emergencies, literal emergencies. Maybe a server goes down or something like that. That can be an emergency. But most people are not in a situation like that. So you can have a certain number of people who are on call, but the vast majority of the company should be free to switch off. And it should be enforced by management. Entitled to claim 30 minutes. The greasy pole syndrome, yes. Everyone wants to climb it, and it's you have to climb over others to get to the top. Yet one more reason that the Tories wanted to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. Yes, it's about protection for workers as well. And it's difficult to arrive at the European Court of Human Rights. You have to exhaust existing legislation, existing national legislation, national methods, I should say, through the courts. But the Tories and others like the Conservatives want to strip away people's protections in the workplace because it's about protecting their donors and their friends, businesses who want to use and abuse their workers. So this is a positive thing from the government. Okay, moving on. My goodness, there are some horrible people out there. I don't know who this individual is. Journalist Peter Lloyd, a horrible individual, probably works for the Express or something like this. Just have a listen to this exchange.
And we're actually seeing an epidemic of misogyny and women dying. So if you're going to have something that's a specific ideology, which my free speech is worth, than actually protecting women and actually going the furthest that we can to protect women, it's the ideology.
Do you know what it is? Do you know what it is?
What is it? You're going to tell me it's Muslim men? Go on.
Well, I mean, the Pakistani rape gangs, they're a pretty substantial problem. But actually, I think you didn't hear me when I said that 70% of homicide victims are men, not women. Men. Mm-hmm. And I am sorry if it bursts your bubble, but women are not special. They do not deserve special laws. They should be treated equally, but so should men. Well, you do not deserve your own laws. Okay, men also get raped. And actually, if you look at the headlines in most newspapers recently, there is a scourge of female teachers grooming and raping male minors. Yeah. And you know what? Because you've got female privilege, women can't be charged with rape. It's only a crime that can be thrown at men. So actually, sister, you've got female privilege in spades. It's about time the law was equal across the board, whether you like it.
The vast majority of them are by white men. So I don't really understand. My main thing with this is,
well, yeah, that's because we're a majority white country, you moron.
Why do you think your free speech is worth more than a woman's safety?
Because
why do you think just being able to keep your ego and being able to say whatever you want to an extent? So you want to basically open yourself up and just be free to say whatever you want with the woman about a woman without having any accountability? Is that what you're saying? I'm letting you speak.
Oh, okay, all right. Let's not get personal.
That's all he has left. Getting personal. You're a moron. He doesn't actually have a rebuttal. So he wants to be able to say what he wants without the consequences of that. Like, I have never felt afraid walking down the street. I've been afraid walking down certain streets, but I've never been really afraid walking down the street. I've never had this fear of walking to my car alone in a car park as a man. So there's a massive difference. There's a massive fear that women have all the time. They have to make precautions. They have to put in place precautions against that. They need to be prepared. Okay, what do I do in this situation? I never have to think about these things. Men normally don't have to think about these things. We're not able to relate. But this guy is not interested in relating. He's not actually interested in listening to what she's saying. He's interested in just his own voice. He's only interested in pushing his own opinions onto people. He wants to be... This is what the problem here is with people like this, is they say that, you know, as he said, most homicides are committed against men. By whom? By whom? Doesn't want to go down that road. I doubt this guy has ever felt afraid sitting on a bus on his own or sitting on a bus with a group of people. I doubt he's ever felt afraid walking into a car park on his own. You know, he doesn't understand what people are going through. He doesn't understand what the fears women have on a daily basis. Just speak to... This is what we need to do as men. We need to actually shut up for fucking 5 minutes and listen to what they have to say. Listen to actually what they go through. The fears they have. Walking down the street and some dodgy person behind you. Like, as a man, have I ever walked down the street and saw some dodgy person behind me? Yes, but I never felt fear related to it. It was like, okay, that person's a bit dodgy. That's about as far as it went. Women are in a completely different situation. That's why they keep saying, oh, they should go out. They shouldn't go out alone. Why should they not? Why should they always have to make measures to deal with shitty men? Henrietta, thank you so much for that super chat. I would like to live in La La Land like you. I'm a realistic, so much as a nice person you are. You're a fool at best or malicious at worst. You think the underlying problem is racism. Is that me or is it directed at this guy? I'm not sure who that super chat is related to. This incel makes other incels look like womanizers. Yeah, he definitely sounds like an incel. But Henrietta, I'm not sure. I am trying to understand your question. You think I didn't actually mention racism here at all. So I don't know if you're describing him here or myself. Davey, great to see you on the stream tonight. Thanks so much, Henrietta, and to Brad for your super chats. It's not directed to you, Max. Okay, thank you. I was getting a bit concerned there. But women go through situations where it's extremely concerning for them. They're afraid. Okay, can I walk down the street? Should I keep my handbag, in another bag, or should I speak to these people? Like smiling at people. It's very easy for a man to smile at people and not run the risk of this person trying to follow you home. If a woman does that, who they're smiling at may get the wrong impression and think, maybe I have a date on tonight with this person. You have to be very careful about your body language, your facial expressions, the way you speak to people, men in particular. You have to be careful how you deal with people, because there's always a risk that this person may end up killing you. Max, it's direct at the IQ 0 on the screen. Okay. Move on, Max. Yes, move on. Owen Jones challenged a guy today about trade unions. So I covered in part of this interview in a video, but I wanted to show you this other part. It's quite interesting.
Of course, there have been issues within the economy. I'm not going to apologise for trustonomics and things like that. That's not my bag.
Can I answer that?
But everybody.
I'm not going. So the Tories are trying to get away from this idea that they supported Liz Truss, but they can't get away from the fact that they supported Liz Truss. When Liz Truss crashed the economy, look, what did she do? She had unfunded tax cuts. The OBR and the markets responded to that, and this eventually crashed the economy. So Liz Truss didn't crash the economy per se, but her actions started a snowball effect. But if she didn't have her mini budget, then we wouldn't have seen the consequences, of course. But the Tories, as soon as she issued her budget, the mini budget, they were supportive of it. Most of them were supportive. Only after would they say, "Oh no, nothing to do with us. We're distancing ourselves from Liz Truss." But they were supportive of this idea of unfunded tax cuts. But now they're saying, no, we didn't.
Issues within the economy. I'm not going to apologise for trustonomics and things like that. That's not my bag.
Can I answer that?
But everybody has felt the pinch. And I just think with the highest tax...
We're all in it together. We all feel the pinch. I don't know how much money this Charlie Rowley is on, but he was an advisor to Michael Gove. Don't say things like this. It's extremely condescending. We all felt the pinch. We all went through the cost of living crisis. No, some people did not. Some people actually had the opposite. They made a huge amount of money as a direct consequence of the pandemic, for example. There was something like £750 billion transferred from the poorest in society to the richest in society during the pandemic. So the richest got much richer in 2020 and on, and the poorest got much poorer. So not everyone felt the pinch.
He's just saying the same thing over again. Can I correct what he said or not? Am I allowed to correct what he said?
Let him finish and then you taxes have gone up. They've got to come down. The economy has got to grow. And I just think you're going to choke off that economy.
This is difficult. The Tories think if you cut taxes, that will grow the economy. But if you cut taxes, it means you have less money for public services. And we know that you need public services. If you don't have public services, then you're going to end up with more poverty. And poverty is the opposite of growing the economy. You grow the economy for some people, but not for everyone. You would imagine that growing the economy would be good for Gove's Charlie advisor. I only copped on in the last few minutes. Yeah. You should go with that Charlie, not that Charlie. This is good stuff.
Going to choke off growth. If you keep paying and keep spending money that you don't have, that will lead to higher borrowing.
How do you spend money that you don't have? I'd love for this question to be asked. How can you spend money that you don't have? See, this is the sort of ridiculous economic theory that you hear from certain Tories. There's a big pot of money somewhere in the Treasury. It's a big bank vault and it's stuffed with cash. And what government department, this is what they're trying to sell to the public. And what government departments do is they turn up with a suitcase and they say, I'd like 50 million, please, because we're building a new hospital and we'd like to upgrade it or whatever, or we need some extra money for teachers or whatever. Can you stuff this suitcase with some cash, please? And Rachel Reeves at the Treasury says, here you go, but don't spend it all in one place. And don't come back anytime soon because, you've had your quota and we're running a bit low at the moment. This is the sort of narrative that they're pushing. Of course, not as blatant as that. But there's this idea that, you can't spend money that you don't have. David, thank you so much for that super chat. David McGuinness, make sure to check out the Two Davies YouTube channel. Liz Truss should have been a comedy gold if it wasn't so tragic. At least we have Noreen Skinner for that.
Higher taxes for hard-working people that need those train journeys, that need to get to work, that won't be able to if you continue to have strikes, which is being called by the unions.
It's not about money. That's they're not on strike because of money. They said, look, if you don't pay us decent wages, we will go on strike. So the government paid them decent wages. So now they're not going on strike because of wages. They're going on strike because of working conditions. The government doesn't really have any control over that. These working conditions are set down by their employers.
A lot of prolonged empty nothing there. The richest Britons are doing very well. If you look at the Sunday Times rich list, the combined wealth of the richest Britons is equivalent to the entire economy of Poland. We have a booming rich, the sorts of people who fund the Conservative Party and benefited from Conservative rule. It is insulting to say they've suffered, that they're suffering like everybody is. And the point I make there is tax them properly. I'd prefer to increase taxes on them. They'll still be very rich if you tax them a bit more and use that to invest in our frontline services, which are literally falling apart at the moment. They're disintegrating. And if we want to get teachers and doctors to stay in the NHS, we have a retention crisis with the nurses, 10% or so are vacant. And if we don't pay our nurses properly, and it is good economics because they spend money, they invest it in the economy, that's good for local businesses. There's so many communities, in the 1980s onwards, their industries were shattered, often the public sector filled the vacuum, and they never properly recovered. If you've got workers with good wages that can invest in the local service, in their local businesses, that's good for everyone. Instead, your lot just made it, boom time for those at the top, whilst the long...
And exactly. If you give money to ordinary people, like a UBI, remember UBI? If you give money to ordinary people, they spend it in the local economy. Local economy is boosted by this. Spending, if you give 100 quid to people, an extra 100 quid, what do? They spend it. They maybe get their car repaired, or they go out and have a meal in a restaurant, or they, buy something in the town. They get a haircut. They get a haircut, so they spend money in the local economy. This, if they're continually spending more and more, this will attract more investment. People will say, oh, there's a business, there's a chance here to open a business, employ people, pay more wages, more money in the local economy. So this is the type of growth that you want to see. What the Tories instead were doing is running public services into the ground and shifting more and more money to the private sector, to the richest in society. And what do the richest in society do? Well, they either hoard it in offshore bank accounts, or maybe even worse than that, they invest in assets. So they drive up the price of assets like housing, which makes it more difficult for people to get on the property ladder because house prices continue to rise. There are people with 50, 60 properties. They don't need 50 or 60 properties, but because they have so many properties, it's more difficult for ordinary people to get on the property ladder. So the richest in society benefited hugely while the Tories were in power, and that's why the richest in society continued to donate to the Conservative Party. Who are the Tories complaining about donating to the Labour Party at the moment? The unions. The unions are donating thousands of pounds to the Labour Party in order to protect workers. Not the richest in society, to protect workers. Now, there are issues with that. I'm of the idea that political parties should be publicly funded. They shouldn't have to rely on trade unions or the richest. They should be completely separate. They should receive public money, and they should operate within those guidelines. It would take away the necessity of members of the public to donate to political parties or organisations like trade unions. But trade unions, of course, fund the Labour Party because they want influence, and that's normal. They want workers protected. They want legislation to protect workers, to protect their members. Why is that a problem? It's not a problem. But the Conservatives are there to protect the richest in society, push through legislation to protect them, to cut taxes on them, to help them when they don't actually need any help. So guys, we're almost at the industry. I just want to cover one final story before we go. As we know, there's an election taking place in November. Donald Trump is not doing so well at the moment, but he was interviewed by the sister channel of the BBC in the US.
I don't think she's a very bright person. I do feel that. I mean, I think that's right. I think I am a very bright person.
So the problem with Kamala Harris is that she's not a bright person. But Donald Trump is a bright person. He's really smart. He's really intelligent. He's the most intelligent person he's ever met.
A lot of people say that. I don't think she's a very bright person.
I love this. A lot of people say that. It is. It's like, I'm the most beautiful man in the world. A lot of people say that, so it must be true. I'm the most intelligent. A lot of people say that.
I don't think she's a very bright person. And you know what? Our country needs a very smart person. And I don't think she's a very smart person.
So he doesn't know which state he's in half the time. Like, the complaints he had directed at Joe Biden recently can be reflected upon him. He's making the same arguments against Joe Biden that can be directed at him now. He doesn't know whether he's coming or going. He doesn't know what state he's in. You know, he doesn't know what day it is sometimes.
So I'm not looking to. I don't consider that an insult. That's just a fact.
But what evidence do you have for that?
I looked at the things that she said. I looked at the way she deals. I looked at her record of her crazy record. I look at her policies. I just don't happen to think so.
Okay, but that's not. I've looked at stuff and I've come to the determination that she's not very smart or she's not very bright. He hasn't given an example. He hasn't said, okay, here's an example of why she's not very bright. For example, she said X, Y, and Z, but he didn't. We could say the same about him. Recently, he was in one state and he said, it's great to be here in another state. So he didn't know where he was. Now, you could put that down to being tired, but he's done it on a number of occasions. He recently congratulated, who was it? The great Hannibal Lecter. Okay. I don't know who he was actually referring to, but Hannibal Lecter is not around. Ian Corfield, Henrietta, thanks for that. I'm not sure who Ian Corfield is, but I'll look him up after the stream. Gaslights are burning bright. Her crazy record. Arthur Brown's greatest hits. Oh my goodness. So guys, we'll have to end it here. Thank you so much for everyone for coming on tonight. Thank you so much for your super chat. Thanks so much for your support. Before we finish, we have our one for the road. Hope you're going to enjoy this. You probably will. Hope you do. I'm sure you will. So I'll see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. And thanks once again to everyone who came on. Thanks for your super chats. Thanks for your support. Thanks for smashing the like button. And thanks to the moderators for doing a wonderful job as always.
Welcome to Broken News. Cyclists have today announced that they're to break away from humanity and form a new master race. The announcement was made by broadcaster Jeremy Vine, who'll become their supreme overlord and unquestioned deity. Our reporter has more.
It's a well-known fact that cyclists are better than other humans. They have more powerful limbs, bigger lung capacity, and many have enough disposable income to spend $6,000 on a fucking pedal bike. Well, as of today, millions of cyclists across the globe no longer identify as Homo sapiens, but instead as Homo asula, or wheeled man. This new superior species has already evolved an inch-thick reinforced perineum and a second skin, a type of organic lycra which stretches over the taut, glistening hydraulic meaty thighs of each rider, as well as their firm, generous arse and heaving cock and balls. Their leader, Jeremy Vine, will, going forward, be referred to as His Excellency, the most holy Baron of Brakes, Shimano Supreme, and Prince of Pedals, and is set to rule from atop a penny farthing, wearing a crown of 360-degree 4K cameras. Back to you.
Thank you. Well, let's speak now to the revered sovereign of saddles himself, Jeremy Vine. Mr. Vine, why is now the right time to break away from humanity?
I'll have you refer to me as Your Excellency, thank you very much. We're just better, a superior species, and we're sick and tired of ordinary humans in their cars who think, whoa, what the hell? No! What are you doing? You're quite a dangerous driver, aren't you? Are you going to say sorry? He's on his phone. I don't believe it. He's on.
Well, we seem to have lost connection with Jeremy, with His Excellency, but still, what a lovely story. That's all from Broken News. You're up to date.
No comment. So have a great week, guys. I'll see you on Friday, same bad time, same bad channel. As always, stay safe, take care, good night.